My name is John Matthews. Welcome. I'm the Executive Director for the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, AGWA. I would like to welcome you to this session, Ensuring Economic and Financial Stability Through Resilient Systems. It's an exciting session, I think. We're going to have a stellar panel and a great keynote, really talking about what I think of as one of the emerging issues of our time. This session is hosted by AGWA, by Moody's, and by Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ. We are focused on what I think of as a kind of new insight and problem. In terms of thinking about macroeconomic policy, about financial analysis, we've really, for centuries, focused on the insight that we need to manage for efficiency. And efficiency works very well if you have reliable, certain conditions, if you know with some confidence what the future is going to look like. But we have a real challenge now. How is it that we manage the complexity that we seem to be entering on many levels? Obviously, this is the COP. Climate change is the most important issue here. But in every session, really in the background, we see other kinds of complexity that are intruding on the processes here. We have political and governance change. We have social and economic change in radical forms and often quite new forms. And managing all of those types of complexity is really difficult. There's a reason that we're holding this session in the Resilience Hub. That the Resilience Hub is really the home in the COP process for where we think about the new and emerging insights around adaptation and resilience. And that's the topic of today, especially for our financial and economic systems. So I'd like to also mention that there are two initiatives that are co-organizing this session. One is the GIZ program called Water for Future, and the other is a program that's supported also by GIZ, but with the Kingdom of the Netherlands as well, and a broad variety of partners called Water Resilience for Economic Resilience. Includes the OECD, includes a number of development banks, and a wide variety of financial and climate change organizations, and a number of countries as well, such as Spain. I'd like to begin by introducing the keynote speaker. And I want to make sure that I read her biography in full. Frau Ingrid Gabriela Hoven is the managing director for GIZ. She is a development economist with more than 30 years of international experience, focusing strongly on sustainability, climate policy, and finance. From 2010 to 2014, she served as the World Bank Group Executive Director representing Germany. Prior to this assignment and thereafter, she held various high-level positions in BMZ. During this time, Ms. Hoven spearheaded new global initiatives such as the NDC Partnership and AF100, as well as multi-stakeholder partnerships in the field of climate risk insurance and finance. Frau Hoven, the floor is yours.
So thank you, John, for your kind introduction, and dear colleagues and friends, thank you for being here, because I think this is a very important topic that you are going to discuss this afternoon. And I know this apparently the session also will be streamed, so many more are going to listen to your insights and actually proposals. So the climate crisis is in many ways a water crisis, and this becomes more obvious every day. As we all know, the pressures on water resources are constantly increasing due to growing demands and the amplifying effects of climate change. Over 90% of water-related disasters are, natural disasters are water-related, including floods, storms, and droughts. And more countries face water stress and water scarcity. And these changes pose significant challenges to our ability to ensure water security, protect biodiversity, and sustain economic development. At the same time, GIZ sees water resilience as a cornerstone of and a necessity for climate resilience. So unless we get the water resilience right with the right tools and business approaches, I think we're not going to get a better climate resilience in place. So actually water is, for the whole adaptation discussion and arena, and can it be, actually it could be really a wheel of innovation and of momentum when we compare it what energy did to the mitigation agenda. It was like the cornerstone of the change, of the transformation, and I think hopefully the agreements reached here again at COP30 on the global goal and adaptation indicators, giving us a more robust basis to put this new agenda into practice and to make it really a cornerstone of future activities. But we also see nowadays that actually we are speaking a lot about security as part of resilience. No? So we are speaking about energy security, but the same applies again, when take the analogy also to water. If you want to have resilient economic system and resilient value chains, water is a core ingredient in this. And unless we have a fair and equitable access to water resources for people and for business, we are going to see more conflicts in communities and at the national level, but also possibly at the regional level, fights about the scarce resource water. A lot of people also are speaking about these very critical minerals. Again, this is really a topic. I wish sometimes you would see as many articles in the newspaper about this critical resource water and how much our whole economic system depends on water. So now let me come to the topic of this session more specifically. Now, why should the financial sector care about water? To answer this question, we can draw on the concept of double materiality. Double materiality means recognizing that climate and environmental factors are material in two directions. First, because corporate and financial activities have significant impacts on the climate and the environment. And secondly, because the climate and environment creates financial risks and opportunities for companies and financial institutions. Take our food systems as an example. A study of the World Resources Institute found that 1/4 of the world's crops are grown in areas where water supplies are stressed or unreliable. 1/4. Agricultural production remains the largest water consumer worldwide, leading partially to overexploitation of groundwater and pollution of waterways. Financial backing of such industries through loans, investments, and underwriting creates a negative impact chain. As water resources become more stressed, the physical and transition risk for financial institutions increase, potentially destabilizing the economy and/or specific parts of the financial sector. In today's session, we will explore how we can use this interdependency to build resilient systems. Let us start with financial institutions and water-related risks. Data from the Carbon Disclosure Project's annual survey show that very few financial institutions are aware of water-related risks in their portfolios. Only 1/3 respondent, around 90 out of 270 respondents, undertook water-related risks assessment. Banks often focus on transactional level screening in high-risk sectors like agriculture and mining, missing the bigger picture. Yet, unless institutions measure and manage their contribution to water insecurity, they cannot manage the risk threatening their stability. I would like to give you another example. We co-developed a drought stress testing tool that enables banks to assess exposure of loan portfolios to drought. And it shows that drought is a material risk in several countries, with losses from loan defaults increasing by an order of magnitude under specific drought conditions. For example, take one of the loan portfolios in some of Brazil's most important agricultural regions. For this loan portfolio, the stress testing tool revealed that under a highly intense 5-year drought scenario, which is not that improbable, unfortunately, anymore, quite frankly, the drought would lead to overall expected losses from default increasing 9 times relative to the no drought reference scenario. And this is, I think, huge. These are not hypothetical scenarios. Water-related risk already affects stability today. For instance, in 2021, the Ahrtal floods in Germany were the costliest natural disaster in Germany and Europe to date, with a significant damage and a substantial protection gap of approximately 75% of the damages. And this in a country that is being considered to be overinsured, quite frankly. In Pakistan, floods in 2022 affected a quarter of the population, but less than 1% of the losses were insured. Obviously, such water-related catastrophes have severe impact on livelihoods and the overall economy, and it really takes, especially economies that are weaker, LDCs, a long time to recover, to get back to the normal economic scenario. And we could continue to speak about the Los Angeles catastrophe and the wildfires and why this is water related as well. I'm not going to dive into this due to time, but again, there is a proof embedded that unless you are more conscious about the water related risk, you run the risk that actually that big damages are being provoked and no insurance in the future are going to cover them anymore. Final point. To date, water has remained an underfunded sector, particularly in emerging markets and developing economies. The CPI's latest Global Landscape of Climate Finance report showed that out of $1.9 trillion of climate financing in 2023, only $49 billion flow towards the water and wastewater sectors. But there are good reasons why we should invest into water resilience now. Water resilience offers high returns and broad benefits. A World Bank study found out that every dollar invested in water, sanitation, and hygiene yields up to $21 for the economy and the society at large. 1 to 21. This is a good business, right? And therefore, I think there are really untapped investment opportunities. The good news is actually that we do observe at GIZ that more and more business and value chains become more cognizant about the water risk related issues, that they should invest into the preservation of water to make sure that they are not getting out of business, because water is not only life, but without sufficient water, you run the risk to get out of business. Many, many businesses are very water dependent. This, if you go to industries such as paper, breweries, etc., textile industries, so throughout, and agriculture at large. And therefore, I think what is needed that we improve our data on water risks, and the OECD has made really big steps into this direction. But you're also right in saying, so please don't wait until we have the perfect data at hand and databases at hand. Start to actually implement the right action with the data that is at hand. And in any case, the evidence that is in our hands with respect to the growing water risk, as well as to the opportunities and the good business cases, should lead us to more action. And now I'm really hoping that we get additional insights from our financial sector experts at the panel. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Frau Hoven. It was an excellent intervention, really pointing to the systemic hazards that are presented by water, but also systemic solutions and opportunities that water presents to help us build resilience, to actually use and leverage water as a kind of medium for resilience. What I'd like to do now is to call the panelists up. We have 5 panelists. The first is Rahul Ghosh. He's the Global Head of Sustainable Finance at Moody's Ratings. And Mathilde Mesnard. She's the Deputy Director for the Environment Directorate and Co-Coordinator for Climate and Green Finance at the OECD. Carolina Grotera. She's the Director for Ecological Transformation Plan at the Executive Secretariat, Ministry of Finance of Brazil. Franz Rojas. He's the Head of the Water Agenda at the Central American Development Bank. Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. My own shorthand rather than actually reading my notes, sorry. And then Chuck Chaidovitz, an old friend and colleague. He's the Vice President for Environmental Affairs and Sustainability at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This is a fantastic panel representing public and private sector, think tanks, people at the leading edge of how we think about, how we manage, how we integrate the financial and economic systems more broadly. The way we're going to structure this is I'm going to go in order that you show up. I'll start off by asking each one of you a question. Like a 3 or 4 minute answer would be great. If we have time, we'll do a second round, and we'd also really like to welcome questions from the audience. I'm going to begin with Rahul, and yes. So Rahul, water is a relatively new area for you all to be thinking in terms of a systemic risk in your work. How have you started to capture the potential impact of water over the last few years, and how do you see that changing over the near future?
Absolutely. Thanks, John. Gosh, that's loud. I recognize there's probably around, probably twice as many people in the audience as the panel. We're a small group, so let's try and make this as intimate as possible. So, John, thank you so much for inviting me today. Absolute pleasure to be here in Belém. I lead the Sustainable Finance Group at Moody's Ratings. So we're a credit rating agency. We rate around 33,000 governments, banks, corporates globally, around $76 trillion of rated debt. So we really need to try and make sure that we're capturing these emerging and often quite disruptive risks in the context of our credit ratings. And our esteemed keynote mentioned this point, but I'll just double click on it, which is water is often the transmission channel through which physical climate risks impact credit risk and capital markets, whether that's scarcity, flooding, but also degradation of water, so increasing temperatures. When we look at private entities, we see in the short term the risk of pretty major revenue drops, operational losses, testing liquidity reserves, no pun intended, but also the huge need for capital outlays to try and build that resilience. And for governments, for countries, we're talking about issues like fiscal stability, food security, economic resilience as well. So these are material issues. I want to try and dimension just how material this issue is within the context of credit ratings. So we've identified 9 sectors globally with about $2 trillion of Moody's rated debt where these issues are already starting to impact credit ratings. So I'll give you a couple of examples. A very important one close to home, or close to this region, where we saw a rating downgrade impact was the Panama Canal Authority. Worst droughts in 70+ year, last fiscal year. We saw shipping transit fall 20+% for the year. Revenue fell. That's having an immediate impact on their credit risk profile. When I look at the protein and agriculture sector, 16 out of 19 companies we rate, including JBS and Marfrig, in this region, this is having an impact on their ratings today. And when I look at new trends, one of the big rating trends that we've seen over the last 18 months has been this huge growth in data centers, whether that's project finance or structured finance. A big data center consumes 2 million liters of water every day. That's the size of the city of Cambridge, where I once lived in the UK, right? This is massive. And so that is an increasingly important credit consideration when we provide those ratings. I'll talk about sovereigns a bit later on because I know we've got the panel, but the point I want to leave you with is these risks are already driving credit risk and ultimately ratings, and how companies respond, how they practice good water management, efficiency, recycling, treatment, how they build resilience will increasingly shape their credit profiles going forward. And I'll stop there and I can give a few examples a bit later on, John. Thanks.
No, that's fantastic, Raoul. And you come with a fan club. I'd like to turn now to Matilda. Here at the COP, when we talk about global climate issues, especially around mitigation, around carbon, we think about carbon very much as a global issue. In a sense, it doesn't matter where the carbon is, it's all around us. It's literally in the atmosphere with us. When we think about water, we often think of it as highly localized, highly specific, that it's an issue for a particular basin or a city, maybe a company, some of the groups that Rahul is talking about. How can a group like, say, a central bank intervene in this space? Do they have a role to play, and what might that look like?
Yeah. So my answer will be yes, but no, I will
That was easy.
tell you how and why. So thanks for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here because we have just, published a report on this very topic. It's called Embedding Water-Related Risks in Financial Stability Frameworks. So that's really answering your question. And what we do in this report is we look at how financial authorities can really better integrate water risk into their operations, frameworks, mandates, etc. So the report makes a crucial point, is that water, as you said, water is at the heart of both climate change impacts and nature degradation. And we all know that these are becoming really a source of real material financial risks, and water is at the heart of that. So, because when water becomes scarce, when it's become polluted, or when it's become too unpredictable, the effects spread far beyond the environment, and it's true in every place, as in developed as well as developing countries, And we have seen in some events very recently that the floods, they displace communities, they damage infrastructure. We see that droughts really disrupt agriculture, energy production, communications, transport, etc. So, and all these events, they interrupt trade, they reduce the output in general, and in some cases, and in many cases, in fact, they spill into financial markets. So basically, it reminds us that water-related shocks, they are not local, you know. They now have cross-border macroeconomic and macro-financial consequences. And this is also the message we recently, in June, if I well remember, we published a global drought outlook. And we showed that climate change is fueling more frequent and more severe droughts worldwide. We all know that. And as the droughts, they intensify, the economic toll is rising also. So the cost of one drought episode today is at least twice the cost it was in the 2000. And the costs are projected to increase again by 35% by 2035. So basically, all that to say that the financial authorities, for them, the question is no more whether they should, consider water-related risk, but how to do so. And that's what we try to advance in at the OECD these days. And here we are seeing a lot of promising progress, I would say. We have seen recently the Netherlands of Morocco doing stress testing, the central banks doing stress testing to analyze how floods or droughts could affect their portfolio at the central bank level and the portfolios of the bank they are supervising. We have worked with the Hungarian Central Bank on a broader project related to all nature-related financial risks. And of course, this includes water dependencies, but not only. And this project has shown that integrating this risk is feasible. It's not easy, but it's feasible. Even with imperfect data, and I really liked what you said, that we need to begin to work now, even we shall not wait for the perfect data to do something, because we'll probably never get it. So yes, we have already many tools to act on these water-related risks. We have the supervisory reviews, the disclosure requirements, the scenario analysis that can all be adjusted to deal with water-related risks. And now we need to move forward and work and move forward with assessments, learning by doing, etc., and really treating water seriously as a financially material risk, not as a peripheral environmental issue. What is at stake is to make sure that our financial systems remain fit for purpose and in a changing environment. And we need to recognize the links between water security, economic resilience in general, and financial stability at the end. So that's why we need to translate basically this awareness into really practice for central banks and financial supervisors. Thank you.
Wonderful. A fantastic point. That central banks actually, that much of the shift in it actually needs to occur almost in their heads to be able to perceive these new systemic risks, but also what I loved in your comments are that we actually have tools that are quite ready. That it's a I think a message that really builds on Rahul's statement too. Carolina, I think I feel like there's a clear progression here from credit rating to thinking about central banks, and now to a finance ministry. And you could make a case that in the case like for Brazil that it is maybe one of the most clearly watertight economies in the world, given the importance of agriculture. And also how much of your energy grid, too, is tied up with water, even the fuel system with biofuels here. I wonder how, in the finance ministry, you all are seeing these kinds of water risks and water opportunities.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. You were very sharp on your observations because here in Brazil, we are a country, we have a very close relationship with water, almost spiritual. One of our leading, most relevant singers, Maria Bethânia, she has a song that says, onde há muita água, tudo é feliz. So where there's plenty of water, everything is happy. There is happiness, and I am very fond of this music. And we understand in the Brazilian government that water issue is as cross-cutting and challenging as crucial, because at the same time, this happened last year, for example, we had floods in the southern region, and we had to spend public money from the public budget to rescue those communities, those cities, and at the same time we had droughts in other regions of the country. So we understand that investing in water resilience is a very strong case of a dollar well spent, real well spent. It doesn't really matter the currency, because otherwise we will be spending much more on rural insurance due to crop lower productivity, or, as I said, rescuing communities after extreme events. And as you said, for a long time we've been closely observing our the vulnerability of our energy system to water stress, because we have nearly 70% of our electric matrix comes from hydroelectricity. And we know that at the same time that hydroelectricity is a very strong solution to climate change, it is very vulnerable to climate change as well. And at the Ministry of Finance, I am Undersecretary for Ecological Transformation Plan, and we design policy instruments and economic instruments in which we try as much as possible to embed water in our policies. And I will give a few examples. Of course, this is non-exhaustive, but we launched our national sustainable taxonomy, and water efficiency and water criteria is one of the main drivers of what makes an activity or sector can be considered as sustainable or unsustainable. We also launched our national strategy for circular economy, and at the Ministry of Finance we lead the working group on financing the circular economy. And of course that water reuse and water efficiency is again a very strong element of our circular economy strategy. You mentioned data centers, and we are now regulating the data center policy. We know this is very challenging because there is a correlation between where the best data centers can be installed, usually where there is plenty of solar potential, but this at the same time often comes with water vulnerability. So water efficiency is again a very important element of our data center policy. These are just a few examples. There are others, and I would be glad to showcase some other examples. Thanks.
Also, a great answer. I was actually really struck just as I was landing in Belém by the thought that this is a city that is actually an island in a river. And maybe we could even think of the Brazilian economy in a similar frame of reference. Franz, again, kind of continuing the progression. Often you're working with finance ministries or maybe line ministries at CAF. Thank you. With an MDB, and I'm curious, in your experience, have you seen systemic shifts in the demand from your clients, from your client countries? Bring on the rain. around climate adaptation, and maybe especially around the need to link adaptation and water in particular.
Thank you, John, for the invitation. Can you hear me well? Well, I have a chorus. Yeah. Hopefully, we're not going to have a flood after this rainfall. Yeah, but the evidence is clear. We are witnessing a new climate normal, I would say, with more frequent floods and longer droughts, and it's happening worldwide. And particularly in the region of Latin America where I work, it's particularly concerning because the recent data show us that we have a flood in Latin America every 10 days on average. I mean, 3 floods per month. And that's very concerning. And for instance, in the past October, we have 2 big floods. One in Mexico, affecting more than 70,000 people, left more than 100 communities with no home, and destroyed more than a lot of infrastructure. And now the government has started a support plan of $100 million, but they recognize that it's going to be sufficient for that. And very, very recently, I mean, 10 days ago, we have a hurricane, Melissa, that affected Jamaica, for instance, and after the hurricane came a flood that destroyed part of the island. And the estimate says that the effects of this hurricane with the flooding represented from 30 to 50% of GDP of Jamaica. And they have a parametric insurance of 150 millions, but we are talking about billions, 15, 20 billion US dollars in damage, and they only have a parametric insurance of $150 million. So I think this should call us to attention, and in the opposite, we are experiencing droughts, and my colleagues mentioned the effects of droughts. And we have been witnessing that in the last 5 years, the damage of droughts represented 60% of the total 20 years. So droughts are stronger and more prolonged and very pervasive in the region. So when we see this data, as CAF, sure, we have more requests from the governments, but it's more focused on emergency credit lines and loans for recovery. The good news is that we are also working on what we call investment project financing that combines not only recovery of infrastructure but also non-structural measures, like for instance to develop early warning systems and information systems to improve the preparedness of nations. So I think that's a good news in terms that after a destruction we're working with supporting countries in recovery, but also looking forward and see how to support countries with early warning systems and others. But much more is needed in disaster risk reduction for sure. And I think I would like to point out that the importance of preparedness and this climate resilience perspective is not only about the floods or droughts. For instance, to work with governments in climate resilience water supply or climate resilience sanitation projects. It's not so complicated when we discuss with some governments, for instance, to have a pumping station to operate with internal combustion generator, because we know that when floods comes, the energy cuts off, and you don't have how to supply water or perhaps how to discharge wastewater because the pump station is not working. So if you have a generator with internal combustion, it could support, and it's marginal compared with the damage. So I think that's a new vision that we have to work with governments. We see that there is good progress, but we still need to work harder.
That's amazing. Thank you. What I hear is this really rapid transition to thinking about systemic projects that really start to think about how we embody water resilience at that project scale, and make sure that you're getting countries really ready for not just the climate to come, but actually the climate emergency that feels like it's already here. And I would take the sign of the rain that el agua está aquí, the water is here, and that we need to be listening to it, maybe even as it tries to drown us out a little bit. I'd like to turn last to you, Chuck. And with the Chamber of Commerce, I often like to tell people that may wonder why the Chamber of Commerce is important in the U.S. Chuck's office literally is across the street from the White House. It faces the executive mansion. Business is important and represents a really significant part of the economy that's not clearly seen and visualized in a lot of the other speakers. Chuck, I wonder, do you see changes that are happening in the business world? How do you see the business case being made for resilience?
Well, thanks so much, John, and I really appreciate you including the Chamber in this discussion. For those that don't know, as John mentioned, the U.S. Chamber is the largest business trade association in the world, representing companies of all sizes and sectors across the broad economy. And so we represent everyone. And so the strong value chain of business across every economic sector. And what we found is, and what we've heard today, is that it is important to consider the impact of water on risk and cost across the economy, but also why communities and companies should invest in resilience going forward. And so we've done a little bit of thinking on the economics of resilience over the last 2 years in partnership with our foundation and Allstate. And the first report that we did was more on the positive side. So it's called the Preparedness Payoff, and I was at COP last year talking about it. And the conclusion of that report says that for every dollar invested, there's $13 in reduced losses and economic savings. And so what that means is that you're not going to eliminate the risk that you have, but you're going to reduce it enough where economies and people can then recover more quickly. So a big benefit. This year what we did is somewhat a different side to the same coin. And so we looked at what happens if you don't invest in resilience. And so what we found is for every dollar not invested, there's up to $33 in reduced economic benefit, so foregone benefits to the economy. And so that's everything from jobs and GDP and income that is not going to be in communities if they don't invest ahead of the next crisis. And so really important, and in the case of water, where we're thinking about all the things that the speakers up here raised across various projects and sectors, really important that we think about and that communities and companies think about why and how they can invest in water going forward.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite the audience, if you all have questions, we have a microphone and each of our speakers has one, and Frau Hoven, if you are also open to taking questions too. Any comments or questions?
Hello, thanks for sharing on such a relevant topic. Would you have an example of a river basin and ecosystem approach where companies, financial institution, and communities are involved? Is there any example you could share on like river basin ecosystem approach for management and investment?
I may. Last year, we supported a Central American country with a debt swap, debt for nature swap, to renegotiate $1 billion with new terms of the credit. So with this renegotiation of the swap, the country obtained $350 million. Okay, that was the savings of this repurchase of the old debt, and the $350 million are going to be address different ecosystems in one of the most important basins in Central America. So that's a way that with a debt for nature swap. With the savings of this exchange, they are going to orient in different actions, and communities for sure. I mean, they are covering water supply and sanitation for rural areas, and it's very important to commit with the rural communities, also small-scale agriculture, also again with communities, and also to address on ecosystem services in this basin in Central America.
Can you hear me okay? Is that
Yes,
all right?
very well.
A slightly different angle to your question, but one thing that we're really focused on is the geopolitics of water. So when you think about globally, around 60% of all freshwater flows are a sort of transboundary basin with more than one country or more than one territory. And we've got such huge demand drivers, this is going to create tensions. And we're seeing that. We saw 350 water-related violent incidents in 2023. That was up 50% in 1 year. But the flip side to it, coming back to your question, is that you can then start to see collaboration interstate and intercountry. John and the panelists, I'm sure, can talk about this more. But we saw, for instance, California and Arizona, that's the example that we often give, agree to reduce by 15% their use of the Colorado River. So it is possible, but in an environment where you've got demand going one way and supply going another, these tensions are only going to increase. Yeah.
May I? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. I can hear you.
Is it okay? I don't think so. Now I think it's better. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your question. I would like to give an example of the Eco-Invest program. The Eco-Invest is a blended finance mechanism that we designed and launched initially with the support from the Inter-American Development Bank, in which the National Treasury offers a specific amount of public resources for blended finance, and then institutions they bid for a share of that resource, and then they have to mobilize private capital and foreign private capital to invest in specific projects here in Brazil. And here at COP, we are launching the 4th auction of the Eco-Invest that is specific for the Amazon biome. And it's not specific to water, so we have different pillars. So, for example, bioeconomy, and we have sustainable tourism. But we have one pillar which is, from my perspective, one of the most interesting ones, in which we call the enabling infrastructure. So we are not talking about traditional infrastructure investments, such as roads, bridges, or even water and sanitation, that I know that it's a very important aspect for all of us here. But the enabling infrastructure for that communities and the productive sector in the Amazon can thrive. So, and in this, we have, for example, local solutions of water management, or nature-based solutions for water and sanitation, which is very important for remote regions in the Amazon. So this is one example of how we managed to bring local water solutions to a very economic instrument of ours.
May I just add one example that it's in another geography in Central Asia. We have a project at the OECD that is called the Nexus, looking at how countries in the region like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, they can cooperate through between water, agriculture and energy sectors. because some are abundant in water, some are really, are looking for water, some are abundant in energy, etc. So the idea is to have a dialogue at a broader level in terms of countries and in terms of sectors to manage resilience.
John, and you probably know more about this than I do, but the Nature Conservancy has its water funds that are multi-stakeholder efforts along various river basins, a lot in Central and South America, where they agree together to contribute funds to do projects in the watershed.
And maybe just I'll add too. In Agua's experience, what we found both at the corporate level and at the investment level, say venture capitalists, that there's actually a sudden shift that's happened, I would say maybe in the last 18 months, to actually engage in a fundamentally different way on climate issues, especially next to water. So I've personally met venture capitalists that they're actually using national adaptation plans as a shopping list for investment, which is really intriguing. And they're often targeting the water projects in particular. And then Agua is also, we're a global network. We have companies that have, within the last 6 months, have started to approach us and say, we understand sustainability, we understand about how to kind of keep things the same, but nothing is the same anymore. We actually need to understand how to get ready for the big things that are coming up. And there's no easy water anyway. It's not a matter of we're going to leave this country and go work in another country. We actually need to understand resilience in this place. How do we measure it? How do we count it? How do we organize it? And that's a really unusual space, right? They not just that they need it, but they acknowledge that they need it, that they understand that they need it as a really critical gap. We have time for maybe one more question, please.
So my question sort of relates to every panel member, but when we're thinking about water financing, we often think about traditionally when we structured the deal on the front end, but what we know from other cases is that we suffer really from maintenance and operation and sort of the back end of the aging infrastructure. So my concern is really, how do we really manage that risk when we know we need to have replacements and maintenance and operations? And to me, that's really the testament of a true resilience water project, and not just starting it and giving water to everyone, but having that long-term viability of water. So how do you sort of embed that now in the talks, the way we were talking about climate financing today as versus the past?
So you're talking more about the OPEX, right? Of just at the efficiency. Yeah, I think it's massive. Topic. We're already seeing a lot of water-related label bonds putting proceeds towards improving the efficiency of water and wastewater projects. Not least CAF, actually, who we had the privilege to work with on a second-party opinion at Moody's. And we're seeing more in that area. As a rating agency, here's the uncomfortable truth. All of that stuff takes money, particularly given that the quality of our infrastructure needs a real pickup. And that expenditure will need financing, probably debt financing, and that can worsen your credit metrics. And as a rating agency, we look at that. So what I implore to governments, to MDBs, to companies that we work with, is show us how that investment today will impact on your subsidies, will impact on your recurrent expenditure, how it's going to ease that burden. So that gives us confidence as a rating agency to look beyond that near-term spike in expenditures that might be needed and be able to factor in more constructively into our credit analysis the longer-term value and benefits that investment brings.
And if I could add, John, just real quickly, as you know, I mean, most of the way in which you pay for operational costs is through price that are passed on to customers. And so, in particular, in the developing context, and even in small rural communities in the United States, the cost of water is undervalued, and as it goes up, it's going to price a lot of users out of the market, and that's going to be a problem. And so that's a really complex issue.
A fantastic question. Before I get into some final comments, I wanted to make sure that I thank the sound crew and the AV crew for their support, to the Resilience Hub itself for hosting such an excellent session, and also to the co-organizers in this session, Moody's and GIZ. If there's something that I would like for you to take away from what I've heard, is that there's a larger transition that's happening. Both the Water for Future program and the Water Resilience for Economic Resilience program, they recognize both that how we see risk is really critical, and that's changing. But we should also think about what is it that we're really aiming for. And I would argue that shift from risk to resilience is also a shift in how we think about what does prosperity mean in a shifting climate, a climate that's continuing to evolve in complex ways. What does building wealth look like in that kind of context? And it's not giving up on trying to slow down climate change, but it's acknowledging that it's here, it's going to be here with us for a long time, and we can still have a good future. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone, especially our panelists and our keynote speaker. Thank you so much.